Now, I've been handed a list, a press list, of people that want to ask questions, beginning with Tom Wilkinson from PA.
Saying that it's a racist party. Sorry. I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yeah. I did hear you. I heard the question. For those that didn't hear, it was about the National Education Union, led by a self-declared Marxist, Daniel Kabidi, somebody who is absolutely determined that our children should be poisoned at school. Their minds should be poisoned about everything to do with this country, its history, what it stood for, and what it's fought for. And as far as reform's concerned, yeah, he is encouraging literally indoctrination of teenagers in our schools by telling kids that reform's a racist party, reform's a bad party, and kids that speak out against that face disciplinary action. And I get reports of this come in via email every single week. I'll make one thing very, very clear. If we win the 2029 general election, we will go to war with the National Education Union and all the left-wing teaching unions. People should be taught objectively, fairly, and should be taught critical thinking, where kids can make their own minds up what they believe and not be indoctrinated. I think the man is an absolute, total disgrace, and as you might be able to tell, it makes me pretty angry. Thank you. Michael Knowles from The Express. Michael Knowles has a question. Where is Michael? There he is.
Nigel, thank you very much. What will a reform-led council look like? How can you guarantee voters that they won't end up with the same frustrations that they have with Labour and the Conservatives?
No political party would ever guarantee anything, but you can say what you're going to do and then be judged on whether you've done it or not. I think point number one is, frankly, we've got to get the auditors in. We've got to see the long-term contracts that many of these county or unitary authorities have signed up to. We will look at the sums spent on DEI. We will look at the £500,000 being spent on ergonomic chairs for staff of Lancashire County Council. We'll look at the £18,000 spent on driving lessons for cross-channel migrants. And I could go on with a list as long as your arm. 10 million a year, quite common for a county council to spend on agency staff. Work from home, almost accepted as being part of what you do. No, a massive change of culture, Michael. That's what we're going to bring to these county councils. We need a sort of British equivalent of Doge in every single one of these councils. And that is where we begin. And by the way, I'm not pretending it's easy. You know, there's less money from central government. There's more demand for social care, for an aging population. SEND for children who've got problems, of course, has multiplied as a result of the catastrophic repeated lockdowns. I'm not saying we've got a magic wand, but what we can do is clean it up and make a very good start. Bill Edgar from the Northern Echo.
Hi, you said that, well, Lee Anderson has spoken about it this morning as well, how the similarities between County Durham and other areas like Nottinghamshire. You were here in County Durham just last week. Why have you come back once again to give your speech today?
And I'll be back again, because this is day 2 of week 3 of me on the road. I'm taking the May the 1st elections very, very seriously. I'm here in Durham this morning. I'll be in Northumberland this afternoon, and I shall go on doing, you know, a couple of counties a day, some of them repeatedly, between now and May the 1st. We are running to the line. This is our first big test since that general election last year. But of course, there are some particular councils in which we fancy our chances more than others. And I think, working for the Northern Echo, you might have worked out that County Durham is one of our target areas. Okay. Yeah, I kind of thought the gathered audience might like that one. Well, a lot of you are going to be councillors. And a lot of you have the responsibilities to face up to from the question that Michael Knowles of the Express asked a moment ago. Tony Maguire, GB News.
Hey, good afternoon, Nigel. It's just a question of, we heard today that the UK government can't rule out another Chinese owner of the steelworks factory. Just to get your reaction to that, but also maybe your take on how much of an uphill struggle Britain might be on if Chinese money dries up for our projects here.
Well, look, I mean, it was the last government that sold out to China in every single way. Boris Johnson, of course, even wanted Huawei, despite their very, very dubious record, to get into the 5G network until I think a phone call from the Oval Office changed his mind on that particular one. At the time when British Steel was sold to Jinghe, Richard Tice and myself, and to be fair, Sir Ian Duncan Smith, spoke up very, very strongly against it. I genuinely believe that Jinghe bought British Steel to close British Steel down, such that we'd be the only major nation on earth, actually, that would not be a producer of primary steel. And we've got this sort of halfway house at the moment. At least the government has done something. We have allowed China to get so deep inside our critical infrastructure, so deep inside our universities and elsewhere. And it's the Tories what done it, but it's Labour that are continuing with it. And we need a completely different rethink. And you know what? If that means less investment from China, then frankly, so be it. I don't want China in our nuclear industry. I don't want China in our telecoms. I don't want China in any of our critical infrastructure. They have increasingly, over the last decade, become a nation that is not a friend of ours in any way. So the answer to your question is, we'll live with it and we'll find alternatives. Thank you. Dominic Penner, Telegraph.
Thanks very much, Nigel. You have said that you want to nationalise British Steel, actually outflanking Labour on the left versus their preferred plan. Are there any other industries that you'd want to nationalise? And just quickly on the bin strike in Birmingham, what's your message to A, Unite, and B, Birmingham City Council?
Yeah, well, look, the reason that Richard and I called for nationalisation, because we were there on Tuesday and we realised there were only 3 working days, 3 normal working days left to get the orders in for the iron and the coal. Otherwise, those blast furnaces would close for good. And that's why we put the call out for nationalisation. It was that urgent. There wasn't time to find a new potential private partner. So that's why we did that. And in Birmingham, well, if you vote for a Labour council, that's what you get. 17,000 tonnes of rubbish, and rats the likes of which have not been seen since the Western Front. No, I haven't been to Birmingham. A couple of friends have visited and said it really is awful. And it represents a genuine health hazard. And I know that 24 hours ago, Army logistics have been called in to Birmingham, but I suspect what we actually need are going to be some soldiers pretty damn quickly and an army of rat catchers and lots of terrier men and things like that to sort this out. But there you go. If you vote Labour at local government level, that's what you get. Matthew Holhouse from The Economist.
Thank you. Mr. Farage, so your pitch today really is about how you're hoping to sort of eat into Labour's support. I mean, if you look at the YouGov voting intention from last month, you're taking about 20% of the Tories' 2024 vote against 4% of Labour's. So isn't the truth that actually, ultimately, you're eating into the Conservative vote, and Labour is a fragment of where you're drawing your support from?
No. That Conservative vote's gone. It's not coming back. Those people that voted Conservative in 2019 in Bishop Auckland down the road are never voting Conservative again. It's gone. It's gone. And I'm going to repeat the numbers, Matthew, for your benefit, right? If you take the West Midlands, the East Midlands, Yorkshire and the Humber, the North East and the North West, they are the regions that were polled for this Survation poll as published in The Sun today. And what that shows is since the last election, since the 4th of July last year, we are, reform, up 12%, right? Labour is down 12%, and the Conservatives are virtually unchanged. I rest my case. Thank you. Let us go to Patrick Maguire of The Times.
Nigel, we heard a pretty moving eulogy from Lee for trade unions earlier. Richard Tice was in the Commons wearing a trade union badge. You've been posing with unionised workers in Scunthorpe, but you've just slagged off the teaching unions.
Yes.
Where do you stand on trade unionism in this country? Are you now prepared to accept, you know, partnership with the trade unions if it means better working class representation for reform?
We have to have a good partnership with the trade unions. I didn't slag off the trade unions, I slagged off a Marxist who was poisoning the minds of our kids and inciting violence against me and everyone that goes out and canvasses and campaigns for reform. That's very different. So, yeah, a pragmatic, sensible relationship between government and unions and companies is, of course, vital. No question about that. Harriet Simmons from Politics Home.
Labour won back all of its heartlands at the last election. Do you really think you can turn the red wall into the reform wall?
The turquoise wall. The turquoise wave. This is what you're talking about. Yeah, do you know what? I think voting has become much more transitory than it's ever been before. And whilst Labour did win back the heartlands, it was a loveless win. In many of those seats, actually with fewer votes than they got under Jeremy Corbyn in 2019. The last general election was an anti-Tory election. Labour won a landslide in terms of parliamentary seats, but not in terms of votes, not in terms of percentages. And look at the turnout. I mean, even with postal voting happening on a huge scale, questionable scale, but a huge scale these days, you're still back down to the historic low of 60% turnout. So huge numbers of people who traditionally had voted Conservative or voted Labour didn't trouble the scorer. And I think that's the other element to our vote, perhaps getting back to the point that Matthew made, is I do think that one of our challenges, but one of the things we can succeed with over the coming years, is to get people who've left the democratic system to re-enter the democratic system. And that'll be particularly interesting with young voters, where there's no doubt, Reform, myself, there's a lot of support out there from 16 to 24-year-olds. And we've got to convert that into people that actually go out and vote. So they're challenges, but they're ones that I'm happy for us to take on. I've got two from the Financial Times. Anna wanted to speak to me afterwards. Leah Quinn.
Mr. Farage, when I look around this event and many other reform events, the demographic is quite similar. There are a few, but really not that many women or young people. Can you tell me one policy you have to attract women and one that you have for young people?
Young people are at work. They're at work. They're at work. And that's why they strike. Normally, I do evening events, you know, but I realise because of the press and the way you guys work in the middle of a campaign, rather than having 1,000 people tonight at 7 o'clock, we have 100 people and you guys at lunchtime, and it works for everybody. So our young people are at work. What I've been very struck by is just how young some of our candidates are around the country. Very, very young. We've even had an 18-year-old elected for district council in Kent recently. He's now going for county as well. So no, a lot of young people putting forward and standing for us. On the male-female thing, interesting. If you look at our general election score of 4.2 million, you see male, female, 58% male, 42% female, right? Why is that? I think because men tend to instinctively say, I like that, I'm going to go for it. And women are a little bit more cautious. So well, hang on, let's just, think about this. It's why men make more mistakes than women generally in life, I think. But what's more interesting is if you look at what's happened between then and say the 12% increase here in the Red Wall or the increase across the country, then what you see, and there's some very, actually we can give you the stats on this after the event. There's been some quite deep polling research done on this. If you look at the new support that's come to reform since the general election, it's now literally bang on 50-50. And I'll give you all of those numbers, I promise. Right, we're going to keep moving. Lucy White from Bloomberg.
Hi, Nigel. You and Lee Anderson have both spoken about wanting to revive heavy industry in the UK. My family are actually also from Lee Anderson's constituency. A lot of them are still there. The truth is that, you know, a lot of those industries were dangerous. They cause sickness in many families. They cause deaths in many families. Is this really the way forward that you see for the UK? And do you not hope for more lucrative and perhaps safer jobs for the British people?
Lucy, none of these heavy industries, as you describe them, have a hope without cheaper energy. And indeed, some of the modern industries, such as the big data banks, you can't even build in Britain. We don't produce enough energy. If we weren't importing 12% of it every day from either Norway or from Northern Europe, the lights would go out every day. So we have to have more cheaper energy, both for old industry, but also for the new tech industry as well. And of course, I take your point that some of the old heavy industries were dangerous, but then construction, which is vital, is also quite dangerous. I fully understand that. I'll finish on this point. We have not been living through an international situation as dangerous as this, as potentially dangerous as this, at any point in my lifetime. I'm pleased that the government have announced an increase in defence spending, even if it is minute, but it's something. But we're going to have to spend a lot more on defence over the course of the coming years. We're going to have to build an awful lot of houses as a result of a 10 million increase in the population due to immigration policies of both Labour and Tory. We are going to need a lot of steel over the next few years. And steel isn't just another commodity. It isn't just something else that's produced in a plant or a factory. Steel is a vital strategic interest, and we have to have a steel industry. That's my answer to you. Thank you. I'm going to go to Chris Jepson of ITV Tyne Tees.
Thanks, Nigel. You say you represent working people, but what do you have in common with voters here in the North East? You're a well-off former trader, but there's many working people here in this region that are struggling to make ends meet.
I fully understand that, but I have actually worked. You know, I've not only worked, but I've set businesses up. I've employed people, and I've had some good times in business, and I've had some awful times in business when I've lost money some years. So I do actually understand how the real economy works. And yes, you're right. You're right. Right now, I'm in a more fortunate position than many others. You're right. I'm not going to deny that for a moment. But I would like those that are less fortunate to be doing a bit better. Do you know why? Because I care about my fellow man, and I certainly care about men and women from my country who I think deserve a better shot at life than they're currently getting. Okay, we're getting there. Just two more, folks, if you bear with me, and then some one-on-ones afterwards that I've agreed to do. Lewis Dennison from ITV National.
Oh, I thought I was doing an interview. Let me pick one of my questions.
No, well, yeah, just do one now. Go on. Have it the dry run.
All right. The trade unions say that the bin strikes could spread around the country. What would you do if you were Keir Starmer?
Well, I don't know whether they will or whether they won't, but one of the reasons I think that we're seeing this strike is the unions perceive the Labour Party to be weak. You know, we saw quite early on, as winter fuel was being cut, all sorts of payouts going to their friends in the public sector and elsewhere. I think it's the perception that the unions are weak that may well lead to more strikes. So, yeah, it may well happen. I guess the approach, well, it's back to the question really that Patrick Maguire asked earlier. It's about relationships with trade unions. It's about being firm but fair. That has to be the answer. Right, last one here until I do some one-on-ones afterwards. Peter Walker from The Guardian.
Hi. I thought you'd never get to me.
You were on the list, and we never, ever... Lee might have a go at you in public, but I don't. Not yet, anyway.
Just a quick one. In your speech, you basically promised to rescind all the extra revenue-raising measures the government have put in. So the farmers' tax, winter fuel, NICs. And you also promised to stick with greatly raising the income tax level at which people pay money.
That's the big one.
All of this will cost billions of pounds a year. And the only proposal you've put forward in the speech to actually save money would be getting rid of DEI measures and chairs, which would probably cost a fraction of a percent of the total budget. Do you actually have a plan for how you'd pay for all these economic plans, whether on council level or national level? And if you don't, do you risk slightly conning voters?
Well, I tell you what, I tell you who's been conned. I mean, £20 billion extra of government spending under Rachel from accounts, they're already 20 billion out. And we can talk about debt if you like. I mean, the extent to which, you know, in 15 years, we've gone from an accumulated national debt of nearly £1 trillion to one of 2.8 trillion. So has anybody been frank with voters about how they were going to pay for anything? I mean, let's be honest about that. And fascinatingly, last week, there was a 30-year gilt auction that the Bank of England withdrew at the last minute, and I've never seen that before. I've never, ever seen a government bond auction be withdrawn, so fearful were they of what investors would demand. So yes, we have deep problems. The reindustrialization of Britain, beginning with energy, with oil and gas, will, within a couple of years, produce tens of thousands of well-paid, in fact, in many cases, highly paid jobs. And it depends how much time we have. But if we can get our hands on the regulators, the quangos, who do so much to stifle business and I mean, honestly, I'm not exaggerating this. Every small trader I talk to, no matter what they're doing, you know, their business is being impaired by unnecessary, excessive regulation. So I'm talking about a cultural change, and a country in which hard work becomes something that we respect, where work from home in the public sector disappears, where productivity increases. They're some of your answers. But yeah, we've got a huge, huge, huge problem to turn around. Right, okay, that is the end of the formal part of today's presser, parking our tanks on the Red Wall lawn. Labour have known in private that we're here for some time. Their behaviour towards me has suggested that, but after today, they will know it fully in public. My thanks to members of the press for coming. My thanks to all of you, part of our People's Army here in County Durham. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you.